On a camping trip in the summer of 1960, two couples in Finland were brutally attacked in the night, leaving only one survivor. With few clues to go off of, the identity of the attacker and the motive for the crime remain unknown. Today, we examine the background and the suspects of the Lake Bodom Murders. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to, let's just call it yet another season of Red Web, the podcast all about true crime, unsolved mysteries, and the supernatural. I'm your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins. Joining me, as you know, hearing this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
Yeah, what season are we? What episode? You'll never know.
True.
We're gonna make this impossible to find. But if you do find out...
I like even numbers.
Yeah.
So I think we're just going to skip to 4.
He likes even. I hate even numbers. This podcast instills a lot of fears in me. And one of the things I think that's a consistent fear now is just don't go camping, man. Just don't. Already, like, you got to have a love and a passion for it, you know, to shit on dirt and then cover it up.
I guess.
And then I'm a magnet for mosquitoes, you know, and it's just like there are a lot of bugs and stuff like that. Like, I enjoy the wilderness, but the bugs, they get me. And then on top of that, you can get lost, okay? You can get lost in the middle of the woods.
True.
You're not experienced on these trails. And then also just prime time, man. Prime time for, like, any stranger to just come up on you. Because who else is in the middle of the woods? You know, the whole point is to be a little bit secluded. And it kind of amplifies a fear that I have. And this is like random, but like, I don't like not open windows, just windows that are exposed at night.
Ooh.
You know what I mean? Like, it looks nice during the day where it's like, oh, look outside. You can look inside. But at night, when people can look inside, but you can't see outside because it's so dark, I don't like that. And that kind of, for me, translates to like camping in a tent where I just don't know what the hell's outside. Something could be 10 feet away from you staring at you and you have no clue that it's there.
That is so, oh my God. I think you implanted a new fear in me.
I'm just saying.
Because like in nature, they don't need their eyes either. They can smell you a mile away like shark with blood in the water, you know?
Yep.
Now, this throws me back to a TV show from 2005 called It Takes a Thief, where they would purposely burglarize people's houses just so they could prove that their security system wasn't up to snuff. And that's where I learned exactly what you're saying. When it's nighttime and you can't see out the window, but you got the lights on inside, anyone in the front yard, backyard, whatever, can just see right in.
Oh my God, that sounds terrible. I don't like it.
It was an amazing show.
I bet. Also, I don't like it.
So you're more of a glamper. You got to be in the RV. You got to be on wheels, but a windowless RV that's smell proof.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of conditions, okay?
Yeah. And at least 2 toilets because, you know, you can't just have one occupado.
Oh, man.
Because then you're out there kicking dirt, like you said.
Then if you blow it up, obviously it's going to sit there for like 10 minutes and everyone's going to know what you cooked up.
That's true. Here's the thing. I'm totally with you because we've covered these cases before where it's like missing 411. Just people can literally, you turn around, you turn back, and a child is missing. Mm-hmm. You're walking with your friend. They go maybe 15 feet ahead of you. They crest the hill. You crest the hill. They're gone.
Right. I remember that episode.
And it's a whole subsect of disappearances, like we said, that have been classified as what's called missing 411. A whole episode we talked about Task Force. Go check it out. But I'm with you. Nature is scary. It's built to kill. It's like, you know, we've been talking a lot about Alien Romulus, for example, and these xenomorphs are the perfect killing machine. The world is filled with evolutionary creatures that have built to eat whatever stumbles into their path.
Yes.
And Bigfoot.
Yeah, Bigfoot.
You know?
Which the wildest thing out of the Bigfoot episode was the theory that they're all up in the trees.
We never look up, you know? We're always thinking they're clomping their feet around the ground looking for footsteps.
That's true.
They could drop from a tree at a moment's notice.
So there must be like 300 pounds.
Yeah, those trees are like eking and creaking. You think that's the wind. That's a family of Bigfoot.
Yep.
Well, here we are. At the precipice of the spooky season. This episode is coming out here at the penultimate week of September. I am feeling the autumn vibes, but I want to give a huge shout out to our Patreon members, and the exclusive content coming out this week is something that we've been super hyped about for years. A long time ago, speaking about getting lost in the wilderness, by the way, we've talked about an episode called the Randonautica app. This was an app that kind of like is supposed to read the intention out of your mind and develop a random spot for you to then go essentially geocaching. And we are finally going to go randonauticing, or however you would say it. Use the Randonautica app and go out there and explore. And that was going to be a bonus video this week on September 25th. It's coming out on Patreon. It is the best way to support us. We do bonus videos like that. You have this podcast ad-free among some other stuff going on, but that is our big bonus here for September as the spooky season kicks off. You can find all that and more at patreon.com/redweb. Just a few shout outs before we continue. Task Force members T-Trex1, Flamelight, and of course, a handful of our luscious, meltable squonks. You have Zachary Orr, Mitch W., TGYK94, and Brett O'Mura. Thank you all so much for supporting the show directly and being Patreon members.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Like the lifeblood. Not that, we zap from your youth, but maybe.
But we might,
The option's there.
And if it happens, it's accidental.
Right.
You walk in the front door and you feel just a little ache in your knees. That could be anything. A storm coming in, our youth rays, anything. So we're recording this, Fredo, before our Randonautica app.
Yes, we are.
So maybe I don't want to tell you about something that happened in the woods, but we're going to do it. Yeah. I'm highlighting your fear before we then go out into the wild.
Yeah, well, at least it won't be dark. I don't know, man. I'm just kind of like trying to take what I can get.
Yeah, we're going to do it at the golden hour because there is like levels of actual danger going out pitch black into the night, into the woods. But with that said, let's talk about this case, something that went down very similar environment. We're on a lake near the woods in the middle of the night. And of course, as with many cases of this nature, we're talking about true crime. We've got a few sensitive topics listed in the description for your convenience. But with that, let me take you back to June 5th, 1960. We have two teenage couples who went on a camping trip in Espoo, Finland. So Espoo is a city about 20 kilometers or 12 and a half miles from the capital city of Helsinki. The group consisted of two 15-year-old girls named Mila Bjorklund and Anja Mäki, and their 18-year-old boyfriends Niels Gustafsson and Seppo Boisman. Now, that might stand out to you. The age of consent in Finland has been 16 since the year 1971, though according to George Mason University, the age of consent at this time was around 12.
Jesus.
It was low. That was a 1920s law, I believe.
Yeah, things are different. Not just in this realm, category, but like in all kinds of different ways.
Oh yeah, you don't got to throw the stone back too far in time to see a lot of differences.
No.
So the group is now going out, they're going on a camping trip, right? And they pitched a tent next to Lake Bodom, a popular destination near the city of Espoo. Now, it's not super remote. The city is kind of right there, maybe 15, 20 minutes to get to the heart of the city, depending on traffic, but it is quite big, quite expansive. And when you look at any photos, you can see just how flat and large the lake is. You look across from it, and it does feel very remote. In fact, the entire western side is surrounded by dense woods. Now, around 11 a.m. the next morning, a man named Esko Oiva Johansson, a local carpenter, discovered the disturbing aftermath when he arrived at Lake Bodom for a swim. It's worth mentioning, by the way, that some sources claim that the man that discovered the scene was actually named Risto Siren, and that is just par for the course, by the way, whenever we look back in time, especially at European cases. A lot of sources kind of have differing information. And so I always want to point that out. You can have very fickle, if not downright misleading sources. And so just some caveats here.
Yeah, there's no certification, right, for the information that's being passed around.
Right.
No one's checking to make sure this is correct. And so game of telephone, man.
I also don't think that, mid-1900s people are like, man, there's going to be a lot of podcasts that want to know.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's just like local police doing their thing. Some journalists get a hold of some pieces, but they're not like, we need to mark down everything for the future. It's just, we need what we need to solve the case, and that's that, right?
It's not like nowadays, especially with the internet, where everyone's like, we need to log everything. It's also easier to, but then also that spans into like everyone wanting to like collect everything because it could potentially mean something, whether of monetary value or informational value down the line.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, even documentaries, there are investigative documentaries like The Jinx. So whether you're financially incentivized or you're after closing an open case, there's just a lot happening these days, a lot of ways to document. Now, it is estimated that between the hours of 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. that night, someone attacked the group through their tent. This likely comes from a few things, for example, analyzing the conditions of the body and the wounds at the time of discovery, but there's also some other details that we're going to talk about soon during the investigation phase of this case that kind of help with this timeline. Now, Mackie and Boisman were still inside the tent when Johansson found them. Bjorklund was on top of the tent, and she was naked from the waist down. And Gustafsson was also found on top of the tent, though he survived the attack, suffering a concussion, fractures to his jaw and face, and several stab wounds. In fact, all of the teens seemed to suffer blunt force trauma to their heads and various stab wounds that kind of seemed to be the method of attack for all of them. And Bjorklund seemed to suffer the most stab wounds, which appeared to be especially violent. Earmark that a little bit, put a post note on your screen, because we'll come back to that idea in the theories.
As of right now, I think it's one person, right?
One person, okay.
Yeah, so as of right now, I kind of think it's like one person. But also, it's like, okay, if you're going after a whole family and you're using something that's like a melee weapon, essentially, it's just it's so intimate comparatively to like a gun.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when it's one person, that's a whole nother thing. But you've got to think that it's brutal, but like as this killer was murdering this group of people, I mean, it's not like he did it all at once. I mean, all in the same time frame, yes, but not all at the same time, exact time. So you'd think that like you'd hear the screams. Like if you're further down the kill order, then you'd hear the screams of other people. You know what I mean? It's just
right. Like someone's being attacked means the other three perhaps or maybe not. And so yeah. It's 100% right that this is not something that you could just click a trigger and be done, right?
Yep.
This takes a lot of violence, a lot of aggression, whatever the emotions are, to continue to move from one to the next, and you're up in their face, and it takes a lot of, heightened adrenaline effort, to continue a crime like this. So you're totally correct in that sense. So the killer, it seemed, used a knife and some kind of blunt object, obviously, though since neither weapon was ever discovered, investigators believe that it may have been a rock, something locally used, right? Something that you could find on the shore of the lake. Johansson then called the police, who arrived at the scene about an hour later, right? He saw them around 11 a.m. and the police arrived around noon. And that moves us now into the investigation phase of this pretty brutal crime scene. Now, before we continue, Fredo, we do have some photos of this case.
Oh, Lord.
But I will say we cherry-picked. There are some that are pretty fully gory online, Task Force. If you're interested in looking that up, viewer discretion is advised. Though we do have one from the scene with investigators looking at the tent. If you want to see what that scene looked like as investigators are kind of lifting up the tent and analyzing it, it's black and white, but it is, again, it's a little gory. But otherwise, most of these photos will be posted, as always, on our social or the YouTube video version of the podcast. So that's the first image I have for you.
Okay. Whoa. Yeah, so there's like, are they like park rangers? There's like men with black dress pants, a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a black thin tie. Not the type of like people you think to see at a crime scene.
Yeah, it's like a very prim and proper, almost to Americanize it a little bit, FBI style outfit without the jacket.
Yeah.
White Oxford shirt, black skinny tie. But then, yeah, you have like someone who has more of a military-esque cap. Then you have somebody who has more of a police officer style cap.
Right. So it seems like just a bunch of different law enforcement from different jurisdictions are here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of blood on the tent.
Yeah.
Like a lot. It is torn up.
Yep. You can see two big vertical slashes, one towards the front, one towards the back, and some other tears. So it's almost like, yeah, somebody came, slashed from the outside, maybe that the knife that was used to injure everybody, either then scuffled through the tent or pulled some people out. It's really, hard to say.
Yeah.
Because the crime scene, as you'll come to know, was not entirely clean. So now as we enter the investigation phase, police found that the first to discover the scene was actually not Johansson, not the man who came for a swim, but instead, unfortunately, a group of young boys who were bird watching in the area around 6 a.m.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And they're bird watching. You know what I mean? They're just, come on. They're so innocent, so pure.
Yeah. So they claim that they saw someone at the scene, in retrospect, with long blonde hair, and they were leaving behind a collapsed tent in the area. They also indicated that a fight had broken out in some form, some sort of scuffle they knew, and they didn't want to get involved, and so that's where they moved on from the area. But they weren't to know that anybody was to be passed away or killed there. They just knew they didn't want to get involved in a scuffle. And so, innocence aside, they didn't really know anything else worse had happened until later on. Now, regarding this man with the long blonde hair, there are about 50 other eyewitnesses around Lake Bodom that reported such a man. This man with the long flowing blonde hair.
Okay.
Now, upon closer analysis of the scene itself, some peculiar items were missing. Of course, they're camping, so they don't have all their personal effects, but we do know a few things were oddly missing, right? The keys to their motorcycles had been stolen, but the motorcycles themselves were still on site. They hadn't been taken and driven away, so seemingly untouched.
So, what's the mindset behind that? Is it just in case they didn't finish the job and then they didn't want to give them the opportunity to get to anybody fast?
Yeah, it almost seems like a way to strand them.
Right.
Like to take the keys and, I don't know, yoink them into the lake or take them with you. I don't know. So yeah, maybe you just leave them to die,
Yep.
In addition to that, their wallets seemed to be stolen. And I do want to say some sources also claim that there was only one motorcycle. Many claim that there was two or multiple. But in addition to that, some of the articles of clothing were taken, right? Including Gustafsson's shoes, the guy who ended up being the only survivor. I do have an image of those shoes if you want to look at them, because they will come up later on in the suspects arena of the investigation. Basically look like two leather loafers with a lot of yellow push pins in them, probably pointing to various DNA sample sites.
That's a lot of DNA and a lot of red push pins too. Maybe a couple green as well, handful of green.
That's my colorblind coming through.
Ah.
Yeah, no, you're right.
There's a majority is red, then a handful of yellow, and a very small amount of green. And then this is also just placed on a table with a L-shaped measuring stick. Measure height and width.
Now, as I indicated earlier, the scene wasn't fully clean, right? It's unclear exactly what all may or may not have been taken because unfortunately the police had not properly cordoned off the crime scene. It seems that news reporters, curious onlookers, etc., maybe animals, had all visited and lightly disrupt the crime scene, even sometimes apparently trampling over potential evidence in their curiosity for what happened that night. Not to mention what may have happened in the hours before police even became aware of the crime, right? So if this took place somewhere between 4 and 6 a.m., crime happens, before Johansson even shows up, who knows if other onlookers, other passersby, other ne'er-do-wells, animals came through and disturbed the scene. So, you're out in nature, right?
Yeah. So it's just a mess because of not only, humans, but nature.
Yeah. Now, they began searching the area, looking for anything that was missing, the weapons perhaps, any other clues, and they do in fact, as you know now, with the photos, they found Gustafsson's shoes. They were covered in blood about 500 meters or just over a quarter mile away from the tent, as if someone had attempted to hide them. That said, they did not find the missing keys, the other articles of clothing, of course the motorcycles were untouched, etc. Now, despite many interviews with locals and other campers, no suspects could be pinned down for this particular crime. We do have some now, we're going to talk about them in a second, but just at the time, it just seemed like a ghost in the wind. Now, after some rest, police began to talk with Gustafsson himself. Again, this is the survivor, and he claimed he had no memory of the event, which makes a lot of sense because he had a lot of contusions to the head, concussion, you can easily lose consciousness or memories. A lot can happen with the brain. But at one point, he did undergo hypnosis and was asked to describe the killer. In this state of hypnosis, he remembered seeing someone in black and bright red. He described the killer's face and the attack with what he thought was an iron pipe. Interestingly, the police also continued to talk to the young boys who were birdwatching that night or that morning, and the birdwatcher who saw the blonde man walking away was also put under hypnosis to see if he could remember anything. And from this, he actually had a description of the face. So they took the description from the birdwatcher as well as Gustafsson, and they created a composite sketch based on these two descriptions that I have for you. There's a few different renderings of them, but they are all kind of centering around the same face. So let me know what you think about this composite sketch.
Before we get to that, this is wild. So is hypnosis that legit?
I'm glad you're saying it because we gotta address it.
Right?
It's not a locked-in science.
Yeah, or is that just at the time it was considered to be more legit than it is nowadays.
I'm very curious. Christian, our guy in the chair, producer extraordinaire, do you mind looking into that, see if 1960s Finland kind of was more interested in this kind of thing? I would say my personal inclination, Fredo, is that they were looking for any answers possible. And so this might have been one of the final paths. Like we've seen that in some cases of desperation.
Yeah.
Where their only option left is to seek a psychic or just whatever possible. And so I can see this where sometimes hypnosis puts you in a state of mind where you have to allow yourself to suspend the disbelief, right? And fall into this trance. Not that it's just like in the movies where you'll do whatever,
right.
But instead it removes your conscious thinking so that way you can put that out of the way and access maybe some buried thoughts or memories. That's one school of thought. The other is hypnosis is nothing. It's pseudoscience, and he probably made up a description to give some answer, right?
Yeah, because I was just like, we're putting a lot of weight into hypnosis here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's just not something that I've heard to be like accurate or used in any sort of way.
Right. I mean, you and I, in a similar vein, tried the Gansfield experiment.
Oh, yes.
Where we put ping pong balls on our eyes, put red light around, and it's not necessarily hypnosis, but it's similar of that kind of ilk. And you were trying to project an image to me so I could pick it up out of the air.
Yeah. We didn't have those abilities.
No. Our X genes lie elsewhere.
Yeah.
So hypnosis can be used for medical and mental health issues, and it's vetted by medicinal clinics like the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic, and it's something used for things like stress, anxiety, smoking, but it can be used for medical uses, treating like asthma, menopausal hot flashes, side effects of chemotherapy, IBS. So it is a surprisingly supported, I guess, method of treatment, but there is still, how would you say it, discourse around the validity of it, if it's similar to just kind of the way placebos work.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Okay.
Because placebo effect is the absence of the medicine, but the full belief that it's there. So there is something to that. And so maybe hypnosis is just placebo effect with a different name on display. And I don't know, but I'm curious if any of this is admissible in court, like when you move from medicine to the legal realm.
Exactly.
Looks like according to, I know we're talking about a case in Finland, but according to the U.S. Department of Justice, hypnotically induced testimony is generally permissible in courts.
Interesting.
As long as the hypnosis affects only the credibility of the witness and not the witness's, quote, competence or the admissibility of his or her testimony.
Gotcha. Okay. So you can say, this is the face I'm seeing under hypnosis, but you can't say like that person is unable to do this because in this state of hypnosis, I just don't believe that they're capable of X, Y, or Z.
That's what I'm gathering. But it does sound like a different source is saying that out of court statements under hypnosis are not admissible. So it looks like if you are pursuing hypnosis, it needs to be done in court.
Whoa.
Oh, like in front of everyone?
You got to be hypnotized in front of a jury of your peers. Yeah. What if I make a fool of myself and they make me,
That's
do
true.
a little dance?
What was it? The Late Night with the Devil had that.
Yeah.
Look, that's the way to do it, though. You got to do it in front of people on both sides, and then a group of people that are supposed to be unbiased,
Yeah. I think that's so fascinating. Again, I have tried to be hypnotized before. I was watching the documentary Office Space, and I thought it was fascinating how like the guy had the stress hypnotized out of him, and he becomes this really blasé character, but because of that, everything just goes for him. It's like, why can't I have that? Stress-free, everything just works out.
I mean, I feel like your brain will get fractured, right? Because there's so much to stress out about.
True. That's why you just do the really healthy thing and bury it deep.
Yeah, real deep.
Yeah, just real deep until it manifests as another person, Walking the halls at night, talking under your breath, and you go, I don't remember that.
Yeah, that's the way to do it for sure.
But that's really interesting. I've always been very, very fascinated by hypnosis. I've done all the summer camps and the grade schools where they have people come by and they have like mentalists that try to read your mind. And every now and then I've come across like a hypnosis person who will have a group of people forget the number 7. So where they're counting, they skip it, but they don't know what they did wrong. So they're counting on their hands and they get to the 9th finger, but they're counting 10 and they're like, wait, I don't have 11 fingers. Like stuff like that's always been really interesting to me. But it definitely, I think, takes a very firm sense of belief in that. So I think the placebo effect angle is strong.
This episode of Red Web is sponsored by Shopify. When you think about businesses with criminally good sales, like Magic Spoon, sure, you think about an in-demand product, a premeditated brand, and scary good marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually a business behind the business, making buying and selling simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret? With Shop Pay, that boosts conversions up to 50%. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. What I love about Shopify is how Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Magic Spoon uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/redweb, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/redweb to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/redweb.
So these are the composite sketches. You're taking a look at those now. Very curious on your thoughts, your initial reactions, but this is what was made public. Though despite this hitting the papers and everything, the case went cold after this due to the lack of evidence in any further reports.
Yeah.
You know, we had those 50 eyewitnesses that said, I saw a man with long blonde hair. That's about it.
It's a lot of eyewitnesses.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at these sketches, bro, 2 of these looking real goofy. The top left one, the proportions are very interesting. Huge cheeks and super wide jawline, very large lips. Like he's got filler, and then the nose is extremely tiny.
Yeah, the face is kind of squished, isn't it?
Yeah, then the face is like squished just on the mid sides. Like they come in.
Like this is a character I'd make in World of Warcraft or something.
Yeah, it seems like a character creation. Like you mess with it a little bit.
Yeah, just a little.
The dude on there's 4 pictures, one in each corner.
Mm-hmm.
Top right seems like a little bit more of an accurate one there. Less. It makes the first one look more characterized.
Yeah.
And then the lower left, okay, yeah, and the lower right, what happened? It was almost like cartoonish.
Yeah, that's like the biggest forehead and chin, but like
exactly
big eyes and lips, small nose, all in a very tight.
Yeah, very tight, and it's just like a lot of exaggerated features. But look, if I saw this person, I'd be like, oh, that's pretty close.
Yeah, I mean. And that's really interesting to kind of think about because I will tease a little bit. One of the suspects we're going to talk about does look eerily similar to one of these sketches.
Oh.
Or to all of them, kind of. And so that's where I'm very interested to talk more about this case because while there's not a whole lot of evidence to go off of, it's a pretty brutal scene, this case really opens up over the years across these 3 suspects that we're going to talk about now. So suspect 1. Carl Valdemar Gillstrom. So Gillstrom kept a kiosk near Lake Bodom and was known as the Kiosk Man. He's on the list as he was suspected by many locals as the one who murdered the teens. He was known to be very hostile and easily frustrated by campers, especially children. It's one of those maybe back in my day kind of older gentlemen that have very little patience for the youth.
Yeah.
And it was said that he would throw rocks at them and cut down campers' tents, something very similar to what seemed to be at this scene, though obviously not with the intent of murder, but definitely with the intent of I'm an angry person and I don't like kids. So he's not doing favors for himself here. And a few days after the murders, Gillstrom actually filled in the well on his property. And so the rumor mill began to unfold. They believe, the locals believe that maybe he's hiding evidence down there from the crime, and by filling that in, he's kind of just tucking it away so no one will ever know. It's weird that you did that few days after the case, right?
Yeah, it's very suspicious. I'm interested. We're not there yet, right? But I'm interested to see if any type of motive pops up because right now, Mostly it's just like, I'm an old grumpy person.
Right. Anger issues, which are not great.
No, not great at all.
But like, is that motive for killing? Yeah.
Like, in such a brutal way.
So as this suspect unfolds, it gets more interesting, right? So supposedly, to add to all the local suspicion, one of Gillstrom's neighbors claimed he drunkenly confessed to the Lake Bodom murders. We've seen this before in the past, doesn't always indicate truth, but the police, because he was drunk, did not think that this was a serious confession and therefore didn't really push forward with any sort of arrest or anything. That said, Gillstrom is also said to have had an alibi confirmed by his wife. He was at home, asleep with her that night, and therefore could not have been there between the hours of 4 and 6 a.m. Either way, he later drowned in 1969, potentially by suicide, so no DNA comparisons could be made or have been made. Reportedly, now this suspect really starts to get a little mind warpy. Reportedly, the friend he confessed to, that neighbor, told him this, quote, "You should drown yourself because you'll spend the rest of your life in prison." And so now you have to believe, did he say that in hindsight? Is he like, or is it true that he confessed and said, well, if that's true, you should go drown yourself because otherwise you're just going to be in jail for the rest of your life? Now things get even more interesting after his death. So he's passed away now. It's been 9+ years. Gillstrom's wife actually comes forward. She recants her earlier statement about the alibi. She claimed that she lied about it, that he wasn't actually home that night because she was scared of her husband who threatened to kill her if she told the truth.
What? I mean, right, if your husband's this bad of a person, I'm sure, there's threatening and that's crazy.
Trying to avoid violence or anything. And so in the end, that's really all we have. And so legally and technically, all the evidence against Carl is hearsay, and with nothing of note to be found at his home, because they did investigate, they did look at his property, they found nothing of note, he still remains only a suspect. And the rest is just kind of like, that's wild. His own wife is recanting the alibi, but is that out of fear? Is that out of regret? Is that out of vengeance? We'll never know because it's all hearsay. Is the neighbor being truthful? Is he not? Clearly, this guy was not well liked,
Yeah, and if it's a person that's just like not well liked, then at that point, how truthful is everybody, really? Oh.
So that's just suspect one.
That's I mean, there's it's still like angry old person. You know what I mean?
At the end of the day.
Like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's angry old person with a lot of like hearsay, and I would even splice in a little bit of gossip.
I don't know though, it can always cross the line.
Yes.
A little extra drink, a little extra anger, snap, go too far. We've seen it happen. And so it remains a compelling suspect, but again, like you said, it all stays hearsay. But that leads us to another suspect, Hans Assmann. And yes, that's how you say and spell the name.
All right, just checking.
This Hans Assmann was a German man who lived near Lake Bodom. He was a reclusive. He was rumored by locals. Okay, we got the local rumor mill back into play. He was rumored to be a former KGB agent and even a former Nazi. Now, Jillian was looking into this because we were curious if this would hold any water. And apparently the Nazi angle was actually true. He was at least a Nazi. We don't know about the KGB agent part.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking 60s.
Yeah.
Or 1960.
Yeah.
Now, he was suspected of other unrelated murders by the police. So some think that maybe he wasn't the only killer in the Lake Bodom case. That maybe he was simply involved, but he was one of two or what have you. But either way, the fact that the police think that he's related to other murders definitely puts him as a prime suspect up front.
Interesting.
Now, the day we talked about earlier with Gillstrom and what happened in the days following, but this is the immediate day after, following the murders. Assmann checked into the hospital in Helsinki with black dirt under his nails and red stains all over his clothes. Doctors claimed that he actually attempted to appear unconscious in order to be seen by the doctors before the other patients, kind of dramatizing his conditions to get through into the ER.
Yeah, because if it's a more severe injury or something like that, yeah, you get pushed to the front of the line.
So the doctors were kind of seeing through his charade. So they knew he was kind of pretending a little bit, but either way, eventually they do see him. And apparently he was very aggressive with the staff. and doctors began to believe that the stains on his clothes were in fact blood, but these clothes were not taken by the police for further testing, which is kind of strange if you have medical professionals saying, I think that's blood, and he might be a suspect. That's kind of weird, but we will get to that.
Okay.
What's interesting too is that Assman actually did have long blonde hair. And when the bird watching boy's story made the news and went public, that was the day or very soon after that he cut it all off. And this is where I have another interesting photo for you. So you remember the composite drawings, we were talking about those. Now open up the next photo I have for you and compare this photograph to the composite sketches.
Okay.
Especially the top right and the bottom left.
I mean, it's close. Got the large forehead, the hair's combed back, you got the very distinct wrinkle line.
You see that slightly crooked nose.
Yep, strong cheekbones,
Bigger eyes.
the strong chin. Yeah, I mean this is very close.
Yeah. And so far, a few things are lining up, not evidentially, right? Not with evidence.
Right.
But definitely enough is clicking into place for this suspect to be very interesting. Now, we also have another photo for you. In this photo, go ahead and open it up and take a look. Task Force is always on social and on YouTube, like I said. In this photo, there is another person. There's this person circled in the middle. This is a man that resembles both Assman, but also the composite sketches. And this is at the scene of one of the victims' funerals.
Oh.
And so many people are wondering, is this the person that the sketches are for? Or is this actually Assman at the funerals kind of overseeing the aftermath or maybe trying to look innocent? We don't know if this is him or somebody else, but it's interesting.
I mean, this can go any of those directions, but it's also another person that's very similar to the sketches. Honestly, kind of lines up, because it kind of lines up closer to the sketches.
I would say so as well.
But it's just, could be angles in play.
Yeah.
Because we are getting him at he's not looking directly on, he's looking off to the side at an angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, his features do seem a little bit more exaggerated, not as cleaned up as the previous photo. So it does line up more with the sketch.
I can see that really strong jaw muscle, right? At the bottom of his jaw, kind of sticking out like somebody that clenches the jaw and it flexes that.
Yes.
Very Brad Pitt,
Oh, yeah.
But also with the big, dark, kind of set in eyes and the eyes, nose, mouth being kind of squished vertically together like the sketches. I think you're right. This feels a lot closer to that bottom left sketch, even more so than the early photo, but it could still be both, could be another person. It's either way, it's greatly of interest to me.
Yeah.
So, of course, the police began looking closer, and as he was investigated by police, he had an alibi. He was seen visiting his girlfriend's apartment that night of the murders, but what stands out to me, and I'm curious on your thoughts, yes, he was seen by someone that night. That doesn't mean you can't wake up in the wee hours and go do something,
Yeah, exactly. You could wake up, go for a late night snack or whatnot. It's not necessarily the worst thing.
Yeah, and the dirt under the nails, the blood, the potential, right? The doctors are saying I think it's blood. So the potential blood on the clothes indicates a scuffle, and that was that next day. And so I'm like, why aren't we talking to this girlfriend? Where's she at? What's she got to say? Or is she covering it up?
Could be. Oh, man. It's just it's a lot of episodes.
I know.
Or it's just so interesting. We just go, it's just so shy.
Yeah, right?
So, and some closer to the line than others, but just so shy of giving you just what you need,
Yeah, it's one of those edging cases. It's just you feel like you're just about to resolve it.
Right.
And you just don't.
Or if someone just said something during this moment or that moment.
It's easy to look back and go man, if only this, right? But
yep, yeah, it is.
This episode of Red Web is sponsored by you all, the task force. As I'm sure you all know, we are now independent and we have launched a Patreon at patreon.com/redweb. And that is by far the best way to support the show. It allows us to continue creating this podcast that we love to create and we hope you love to consume. But it also allows us to give you additional bonus content, which is some of the stuff you can get when you sign up. For example, coming out this Wednesday on the 25th, our bonus content is the Randonautica video. The four of us got together, we went out, used the app, let it take us on an adventure, and it was a good time. So hopefully you all enjoy the video. And that's something you can see if you are a member at our Patreon. But you also get things like access to this podcast ad-free. You get episodes of Movie Club, our bonus show that we do, where we talk about horror movies every other week, which is one of my favorite things we get to do at this point. And it's all four of us talking and just shooting the breeze about horror movies. So please consider subscribing to the Patreon, following the Patreon. And if you can't, just spread the word of the podcast. Send your favorite episode to somebody you know that you think would be able to get a kick out of some true crime goodness. Induct some people into the task force. Grow our ranks as much as you can. So once more, that's patreon.com/redweb. Anything helps, and we are so grateful for all of the support that you all have given us over the last few months. It is truly so much fun to be able to continue to make this show, and we hope to be able to continue doing that for as long as we possibly can. Till we're 90. Is that still a timely reference? I don't know. Anyway, back to the show.
Now, there's a huge conspiratorial wrinkle on this particular suspect that only makes it more compelling.
Oh, God.
So, and this comes from the doctor that treated him, right? Remember, he goes to the ER, sees a doctor, he's mean, they see blood, etc., etc. The doctors don't investigate the bloody clothes. They don't seem to look further into that alibi. Now, the doctor themselves who treated Asman theorized that he was actually, for sure, the KGB agent that the town thought he was, and that perhaps the police are covering up his crimes in order to prevent foreign policy issues. That we don't want to implicate this person who might be an agent because we don't want to scale up into an international scuffle that this could go way out of hand very quickly. And I'm like, oh my God, that's wild.
It seems so unfair to family, too.
Very, very unfair. But these are heated times. I'm not saying that this is right, but I'm like,
yeah.
I can see it being an angle. I could see that being possible.
Damn.
But that's how the doctors felt. The ones who were saying, this guy had someone else's blood on him, man. Interesting.
Yeah. The thing is, I do see, like, the government going, look, we got to think of the bigger picture here. Because moral lives could be at stake type of situation, but it's just so unfair to the families.
Yeah, it's that, and maybe I'm wrong here, but the idea of the greater evil, right?
Yep.
So that is our second suspect, but it leads us to the third. And sometimes I just sit here before I dive into it because I'm just like, I'm so eager to hear what you want to say. I can feel the tension rise, but let's just do it. Niels Gustafsson himself, the survivor, is now a suspect, and I'm going to just rip the Band-Aid off. He has been arrested and since acquitted in this whole thing. So let's talk about it.
Okay.
In April 2004, 40 years after the Lake Bodom murders, Niels Gustafsson, the sole survivor, was arrested and suspected of being the killer. DNA tests, of course, were not available at the time of the murders. We talked about this in many true crime cases, but police were able to run some DNA analyses in 2004. The test showed evidence of every victim's blood on Gustafsson's shoes. Again, you were pointing out the yellow, green, and red pins. Those could be saying, hey, this is blood sample A, B, C, etc. We don't know exactly, but that's what that could be. It's definitely pointing to some stains. There was no other DNA present on the shoes beside the 4 victims, which led actually directly to Gustafsson's arrest. Basically saying that if he was one of 4 victims and there was somebody kind of committing these crimes, why aren't we finding any other DNA here?
Yeah.
Of course, that doesn't mean that the attacker is also bleeding, right? And we'll talk about that, but I'm just saying this is what happened. It led to his arrest. After his arrest, a new witness came forward and claimed that both Gustafsson and Boisman, the 2 18-year-old boys, young men, had visited her tent that night, though she argued that Gustafsson was also a victim. We don't have much to go off of here. We don't know exactly what happened that night, but she came forward after his arrest and said, hey, they visited in the night. I have reason to believe that he's actually a victim, not the criminal here.
What? That doesn't mean you can retaliate like that.
Basically saying that he was also attacked. That's a 5th person. Some other entity was the murderer. That he was just a victim, not somebody that retaliated.
Oh.
Yeah. We don't know much else about her claims.
But then why has nothing else been reported or?
Right. Like, where were you in the early, and maybe she didn't want to step up in the early days and implicate herself, right? And say, hey, they came to our tent and now you're suddenly a person of interest. But man, does it get frustrating when decades later people come out of the woodwork with new information.
Yeah, and that's like a big amount of information. There was somebody else there and
or nearby,
I guess. And then to be, I don't know, to switch it from being like, oh, I'm kind of like the suspect to like, victim.
Yeah. I don't think it was him because him and his friend came and visited our tent in the middle of the night, and I thought he was a nice boy.
Yeah.
But also, what's going on with that? Where was all this?
There's nowhere at all.
So they've been up in the middle of the night. We at least know that. And that kind of plays into what the prosecutor's story of the night might have been. So jumping forward a year, in 2005, this all went to trial. And the prosecutors, based on everything they could possibly know, tried to pull together a story of what might have gone down that night. They claimed that Gustafsson got into a fight with Boisman, perhaps when they were awake, doing what have you. They got into a fight, which then turned into a physical scuffle, which is how Gustafsson, got his injuries to his face.
Okay.
The broken jaw, the facial bones, etc. Now, supposedly, per this story, Gustafsson lost and was exiled from the tent, forced to leave. And maybe this is when I'm pulling threads together. Maybe this is when he saw this other woman camping nearby. Either way, the story continues per the prosecutors that he then returned later that night and killed everybody out of jealousy, out of anger, whatever have you. Now, Björklund, Gustafsson's girlfriend, suffered the most injuries, and she was also outside of the tent on top of it like he was. And so many people seem to indicate that this might have been evidence of a crime of passion, or maybe a response to being rejected sexually, or whatever, like, invalid reason there is, this might have been why he carried out the crime. Right?
Yeah, I mean the pants was missing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oof. It's a theory that lines up.
It's pulling together what little we know, you know?
But it's trying to attach itself.
Yeah. Now, much like the movie Scream, the prosecutors then claimed that he then turned on himself, stabbing himself, injuring himself further in order to make himself feel and appear like he was also a victim. That'd be pretty brutal. And this is when the defense stepped in and they claimed that he was too injured to do a few things. 1, to kill anybody else. 2, to turn and hurt himself. In fact, they said that his injuries did not appear to be self-inflicted. And then on top of that, I kind of want to talk about the idea of the shoes. Because if it was him, then it means that he knew to specifically hide his shoes. And somebody in such a state, they were claiming it would be a hard ask to ask somebody who's mostly concussed to walk a +1 mile away, try to hide the shoes, walk a +1 mile back, and try to make it look convincing that they were also just a victim. And then on top of all this, what makes it more complicated is the fact that Gustafsson himself was arguing that he may have experienced amnesia as a result of the blows to the head. He wasn't sure. He's like, I don't know if I forgot. I don't know what I don't know. But it does make sense either way that if he's getting struck in the head, there's going to be some level of amnesia in play. I've been concussed and walked off the rugby pitch before.
Yeah.
Without being unconscious, I was walked over and then I just kind of came to on the sidelines. And so, like, there are varying levels of concussion.
Is it like a Scream type of situation here? You know what I mean? Where they just injured themselves severely. But I don't know. It takes a certain kind of person to do that, especially to such great length.
Right. And I wish, without knowing more about these individuals and what either they're capable of, what their kind of disposition is, it's really hard to say, especially now that, you know, this went to trial. You're going to have the polar opposite angles on both sides, and both seemingly make sense. Both are kind of pulling clues together that are not hard evidence, you know? And so they're almost just trying to plant doubt in the jury's mind. And so that's the kind of realm we're in, where we're just building a case, building a story to either help or hurt this individual, or acquit or implicate, right?
Yeah, it seems like both ends are kind of grasping at straws and just trying to see what kind of jury they're working with here to be able to convict or not convict. Yeah, I agree.
It is interesting, coming back to the shoes for a little bit, because some do see the DNA on the shoes as evidence for him being the killer. Despite the fact that, as you indicated, right, you looked at the tent, there's blood on the side of the tent. The tent was actually brought to trial. There are photos of how the tent appeared in trial. It looks a little bit cleaner, unless we're seeing the other side of the tent, but you can see just how like torn apart it is. There's a lot of stains on it, so to speak. And so I'm personally hard pressed to go like, oh, there's stains on his shoes, therefore it must be him. But I think what's going on here is that people are thinking he put his shoes on when walking away or coming back or what have you, whereas the others are sleeping, so they don't have their shoes on. And so the fact that his shoes are all covered in blood, I don't know, that maybe he was the one that did it, that no one else was there, and that the fight between him and the other guy would have been the cause for all the DNA sources to end up on the shoes. But I don't know, like, I don't know if that's just not clicking in my head. I'm really curious on your thoughts on that, though.
I mean,
like, is that enough to arrest somebody? I don't know.
I don't know, but I mean, like, man, talk about bad timing. You know what I mean?
Very, yeah.
Just I got into a scuff, and that's why there's blood on my shoes. Like, oh man.
I'm just saying, like, it's totally possible, from my understanding of this case, that even if the shoes are, I mean, the fact that the shoes were removed from the scene is that someone's paying attention to that. So that is interesting. And who better to pay attention to than him if he is the guy that did it? But in this scene, if this attack is as violent as it sounds, why wouldn't blood end up in places like this?
I mean, it would end up everywhere, right? Especially if we're thinking it was a rock.
Yeah. Man, okay, no, the fact that the shoes specifically are tucked away and hidden, I think that's just weird.
Yeah.
And so I don't think, to me, it confirms in my mind. It's not clicking things into place and being like, definitely him, but it is definitely suspicious.
Yeah. I would hate to be the jury in this case because I just feel like I've been the jury once.
What?
Yeah, I've been a part of the jury once. It's very fascinating. And I saw the defendant came out, said all these things. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, like, no, that makes sense. All the evidence adds up. And then the prosecutor came out with their side and all of that evidence. And I went, oh, okay, hold on now. Like, that's very convincing.
Dang.
Possibly even more convincing. And so it's just like, I just feel like this is the same kind of case in the sense of like, it just really depends on like what little pieces would resonate with you as a juror.
Right. And that's what makes it tough, is listening to two talented lawyers spin their angle, right? Because there's going to be a little bias in play because they have a job to do. But either way, there are some wrinkles that people have considered, you know, regarding the shoes, right? It is suspicious. It does stand out. The fact that all their blood's on it and they were trekked away and hidden doesn't look great for him. It is starting to settle in my mind in that sense. But some people have also said maybe the killer put on his shoes and then walked away. And then when he was far enough from the site, took them off, put their own shoes on because they didn't want to leave their own footprints, or they didn't want to like get their own shoes dirty and evident. There's a lot of premeditation into that, but we don't have any other evidence to go off of. So I don't know.
But I mean, also, you're camping, stuff's just lying around like shoes.
True. Man, and so maybe he looks down and he's like,
right.
Oh, my shoes got all bloody. Got to get these out of here.
Right. Most likely right outside the tent.
Now, okay, it's starting to click slowly because, like, if somebody else, a fifth person, a stranger came through and did this, let's talk about Ass Man. He comes through and he sees, like, oh, looks like my victim's shoes are bloody. Oh, well, unless they also bled and thought they bled onto those, Anyway, I could talk myself into a knot.
I know. I go back and forth.
The point is, Gustafsson went to trial and he was acquitted of murder, but many still suspect him. And I think that this is why the case will forever remain unsolved, because one suspect it's all hearsay, but they've passed away, so we'll never know. One suspect has government conspiracies potentially protecting their innocence or guilt. And then the third is part of the crime itself, has some eyebrow-raising elements to it, but none of it is enough to lock it in. And so it's just one of those crimes that will, I think, forever plague our minds as deeply, morbidly fascinating, but we just can't know.
Yeah, there's just not enough to push these different theories over the line.
Yeah. Golly.
I know.
What a case, though.
I know. It pulls you in a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
It's like one of those, it pulls you to one person, and then, but not enough, but then pulls you to another person. Also not enough. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I hope I never end up in a jury, because I'll be like, wow, both made great cases. Can I stay neutral?
Right.
Where's the beige vote here? But was yours one of those cases where they're like, we need a unanimous thing? Or was it one of those lighter cases where it's like small claims court where they're like, my roommate stole my Cheetos. I saw the orange fingers.
It had to be unanimous. And the unfortunate part was there were people that were just like not willing to put in the time to really think about it, which is like terrifying.
Oh my God, very. Like
Yeah.
they just want to be like, I just want to get on with my life.
Yep.
And so they're like, let's just say this.
Yep. I mean, they like said things to like literally that extent. And I'm just like, guys.
There are people's futures on the line here.
I was like
Ugh.
early 20s, and it's just a room full of people just kind of like, okay, so, this is kind of what we're thinking. Yeah, we're good with this. And I was like, well, we're not going to take time on this?
Right.
Yeah, it's a little wild.
That is wild. But that has been the case of the Lake Bodom murders. A fascinating one deep in the heart of Finland. Like, we're getting all over the world now. We're kind of putting a pin in every country. We did Belgium recently. But yeah, very eerie case. And it should spike your fear about going camping out there because you never know what's going on.
So I'm saying you never know who's standing right outside 20 yards away looking at you.
Right. Oh my God. And this reminds me of just of bear videos where they're like, oh, they look cute. They look like a little dog or like a big dog. But the way they like kind of stalk you is like too friendly until they just aren't. Yeah, nature is gnarly. Well, that said, Task Force, thank you all so much for coming, listening to Red Web once again. We greatly appreciate you. And if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so in a couple ways. First of all, free, easy. You can review this podcast wherever you listen to it, Spotify, Apple, Google Play, wherever.
Goes a long way.
It goes a long way. Boosts us to get us into the lists, as we've been making some lists on Spotify, thanks to you guys, and thanks to our friends over at Spotify. But also, just sharing it, word of mouth, is absolutely huge. It is the greatest compliment when you share us with the other family and friends of your lives who also love mysteries, also want to explore the dark underbelly of this world and what could be and what is and what if and all of that. But otherwise, yeah, we've got merch, store.redwebpod.com. We got a couple of cheeky Halloween things coming in the near future.
Yeah, we do.
And of course, patreon.com/redweb. Fredo, any last thoughts?
Thank you guys again, as always. Cannot stress enough the love and support. That's why we get to keep doing this. So, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you.
Thank you guys. All right, Fredo, I'll see you right back here next week on the eves of October for a spooky mystery.